Hello, this is astrologer coach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming new moon in 1.5 degrees of Capricorn, which will be exact on December 23rd at 5:17 a.m. New York time, nice and early in the morning, and 10:17 a.m. London time. Now, this, of course, launches a new moon cycle, as always with the new moon. And before we jump in, I just want to mention two things very quickly. One is that on January 6th at 5 p.m., we have our first forecasting forum of the year. We will talk about what to expect for 2023. So join us for a full forecast for the coming year, if that sounds right to you. There will be an early bird special, which is $32 until January 4th. And everyone who's registered also gets an MP4 video recording of the live event, of course. And as always, star members are automatically registered. Also, if you want to stay on the pulse of the planetary shifts for this coming year and see how an understanding of these energies can serve you personally, join us every month. Every month, I will be talking about what the changes are, what's coming up, in connection with our birth charts. And right now I'm offering an additional $36 discount for the yearly star membership until January 4th. And that reduces the cost from $27 a month to $20 a month. So it's a pretty good deal. So if you would like to join us more often than not, this might be the way to go. Click on the link below this video to add the yearly star membership to your cart. And then at checkout, use the discount code HAPPY2023 exclamation point. All right. I will also have that written below the video. And if you just want to register for this month only with the early bird special, then there will also be a link for that below the video as well. All right. Now let's talk about this new moon. New moons are good times to reflect on our lives and to set some new intentions. We will go into detail about that towards the end of the video as well. And this is, of course, an excellent time to go within and plant new seeds for anything we would like to accomplish over the next 28 days or beyond. And given that this is taking place less than 48 hours after the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, this new moon is a significant time to set intentions, not just for the next 28 days, but also for this winter season. Now, this is because solstices are important turning points, and they happen twice a year. They are energetic gateways during the summertime and the wintertime, sort of like invite us into the summer season and the winter season. And therefore, these are great times to set intentions and to do some rituals. Now, because the new moon is so soon after the winter solstice, it's a great idea to wait until after the new moon to be setting your intentions. Now, this new moon is also a supermoon, and these occur when the moon becomes either full or new and is at its closest distance to the Earth. And so that makes them a little bit more powerful. Now, they generate greater gravitational and electromagnetic forces when they're that close to the Earth. And so therefore that increases the effects that it has on us, on the planet, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And this can lead to significant shifts in consciousness for all of us. So since this new moon occurs in Capricorn, this super new moon directs us to investigate our relationship with authority, and not just authority in the external sense, but also our inner authority, the ability to listen to ourselves and be our own authority. Now, the most prominent themes of this super new moon are Chiron, the wounded healer, stations direct less than an hour before the new moon becomes exact, and so it's extremely exalted at the time of the new moon. And it also makes several aspects to other planets in this new moon chart, bringing our attention really very directly to our healing processes. Now, the new moon makes a square to Jupiter, which Jupiter will move back into Aries on December 20th, asking us to stretch and grow. There's some kind of need to overcome something in terms of the old or the traditional. Now, Mercury is also exalted in this new moon chart. Mercury is right now in its pre-shadow phase and stationing, and is making several noteworthy aspects as well in this super new moon chart, bringing our attention to being responsible and realistic with our words and thoughts. Now, practicing effective, authentic, mature, and empowering communication is going to be very helpful for the next 28 days. And then last but not least, there is a Venus-Uranus trine that brings newness into our relationships and possibly also into our financial future. So let's talk first about Capricorn to see what that vibration is all about, that energy is all about. Now, the highest vibration of Capricorn is self-mastery. It's about learning how to master ourselves, to get better at who we are and what we're doing out there in the world. And it is the development of responsibility, resourcefulness, reliability, setting realistic goals, and healthy boundaries that we have with other people or with the world at large. So the next 28 days are perfect for working in any of these areas. And this is the last new moon of 2022 and also the second new moon in Capricorn this year, because we've had one at the very beginning of the year already. And so since Capricorn represents the quest for self-mastery on the physical plane, you might want to ask yourself some of these questions that I'm going to be posing here below. And by the way, the whole new moon video will be in connection with a lot of coaching questions. And the coaching questions are there to really help you align with the energies. And they're not there for you to answer the questions necessarily, but for you to tune into the questions and let yourself be guided in terms of your intuitive knowing with these questions. And you can journal on these questions, you can meditate with them, you can do brainstorming with other people around these questions in a group setting, whatever feels right. Okay. Now, one of the questions you do want to ask yourself here with this Capricorn energy is, what is my relationship to self-mastery? And am I going about things in a realistic way at this time? And what does setting healthy boundaries look like to me? What does that even mean? And that's definitely something you could journal on. What do I know about my limitations or other people's limitations? What do I know about that? Now, this is a really important question with Capricorn, because obviously as human beings, we are limited in some way. We can't be everything for everybody. We can't do everything that we might want to do. So there are limitations that we all have. Question is, are we aware of our own limitations? It's so much easier to see other people's limitations and not our own, but it's so important to really let ourselves see what our own limitations are, to be honest about that, not to be critical about that, not to punish ourselves for that, but to be realistic and to understand, I'm human, therefore, I have limitations, and I'm happy to overcome some of these limitations, but maybe others might not be so easy to overcome them. And then we have a much easier relationship with other people's limitations as well, once we can embrace our own or be realistic about our own. Now, for more details about Capricorn, read my new moon article via your membership portal on my site if you are currently a member on my online community. I will be posting the article on December 19th. If you want to become a member of my online community to get access to all my articles and other membership content, including all of the coaching questions in writing from this video, then feel free to take a look at my memberships on my website at astrologercoach.com. Also, feel free to use my timestamps in the description part of the video to watch the video in smaller sequences, or jump to a part of the video that you're interested in, because we're going to now start talking about some of the aspects of this super new moon chart. We're going to just dig a little deeper, okay? So feel free to take breaks if you need to. The first thing we want to talk about is the new moon in Capricorn squares Jupiter in Aries. And this could cause us to feel impatient or frustrated, because it is challenging us to expand our perspectives around things we identify with, and also any personal goals we're currently pursuing. So we might feel this push and pull towards like really wanting to explore ourselves a little bit more, our goals, but then there might be a lot of that stuff going on out there in the world where we feel like we have obligations, or we feel like we have to show up in a particular way, whether that's career-wise or whatever long-term goals we have for ourselves. And so these two components, Jupiter and the new moon, are feeling that feels a little bit like a stretch that we have to engage in. We have to stretch ourselves. Now, what you can ask yourself here is, if I notice my career long-term goals or my need for achievement might be keeping me from being fully myself, could I let myself grow beyond those limitations or traditional perspectives? So this is a very good question in connection with this square. Another question you can also ask yourself, if you're feeling overwhelmed at some point, could I be 5% more aware of overextending or overpromising when it comes to how I want to be seen in the world? And could I be 5% more real? For instance, avoid exaggeration, especially around personal goals or passions and anything connected to things I identify with or as. So could I be 5% more real? Now, Jupiter re-enters the sign of Aries on December 20th. That's only 3 days before the new moon becomes exact, and it will stay in this independent, passionate sign until May 16, 2023. So Jupiter will be in 0 degrees of Aries at the time of the new moon, and that's an exalted degree. So the energy of that Jupiter placement will be quite strong because it is in 0 degrees. Now, we also, of course, recorded a webinar on Jupiter in Aries. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check that out on my webinar page. Now, Jupiter entered Aries for the first time in May of this year, the 10th to be exact, and remained in Aries until October 28th, before it started retrograding back into Pisces. So think back to that time, May 10th until October 28th of 2022. Ask yourself, what lay across my path during that time? What prevented me from being myself more fully? What prevented me from following my goals that I feel passionate about? And what have I learned about my human persona or personality since then? And is there more to learn? And what beliefs have held me back from being hugely excited about where I'm headed? So these are just some questions you can ask yourself in connection with that time frame when Jupiter was already in Aries earlier this year. So you can get a sense for where you were at. And that will tell you a little bit what's coming next with Jupiter being in Aries until May of next year, 2023. Now, in this super new moon chart, Mercury in Capricorn is sandwiched between Pluto and Venus. So we have a lot of planets in Capricorn, right? We have the new moon, the sun and the moon. But then we also have Venus, Mercury, and Pluto in Capricorn. Now, Mercury's alignment with Pluto and Venus invites us to confront our fears and face our shadow issues as they pertain to power and authority, ours and other people's. And so we can ask ourselves here is, what old ways of being do I need to shed? What traditional or old ways of being do I need to shed? And is there anything that still feels disempowering to me, especially out there in the world or in connection with career goals or financial goals, long-term goals, relationship goals? Where do I still look outside of myself for permission or approval? Because remember, Capricorn is all about self-mastery. So the more we look outside of ourselves for permission or approval, the more we are not really doing Capricorn's work. And Pluto, of course, wants us to really dig deep into doing the work right, to transform the lower vibration of Capricorn and making it a higher vibration of Capricorn. And then where do we still look for what's right or wrong out there in the world? And who are my favorite people to give my power to? Now, I want to say here that nobody truly gives their power to anybody consciously most of the time. I mean, most of us would probably not do that. If we knew in that moment we were giving our power away, we would probably be like, no, I'm not doing that. But often we don't even realize that we're doing that. So sometimes there are people out there in the world that we just give our power to only because we assign to them a knowing that we think we don't have. And so therefore, they become more of an authority figure than we are for ourselves. Now, this could be anybody. This could be a relative that we give our authority to. This could be a friend that we think knows more than we do. It could also be a public figure or a person with social authority, such as a doctor or a scientist or politicians. Public figures like news anchors, actors, comedians. These are all people that we sometimes give our power to, not always knowingly, but when we are not owning what we already know and we think that other people know more than we do, then there's a tendency to make ourselves less than them. And we're also not necessarily always double checking what we already know. Now, some other questions you can ask here is, where am I experiencing quick fix responses or behaviors in my life? Where I really, sometimes I see something in life and I just want this to be fixed and over. This could be sort of an impatient thing that maybe Jupiter and Aries would like, let's just move. Now, obviously with Capricorn, there's no such thing as a quick fix ever. So, because Capricorn is down to earth, it's realistic, it wants to go step by step. So where am I experiencing these quick fix responses or behaviors in my life? And what would a real change look like if I actually wanted to make a real long-term change? And what needs to die for something new or more resilient or authentic to be born in its place? And that is a very powerful question. And then what fears are holding me back from making fundamental changes in my life at this time? Now, Pluto's involvement could foster an all or nothing attitude over the next 28 days towards our long-term goals, business relationships, finances, or also our standing in society. So we might become also really obsessed over any of these things, and it might bring up fear of losing control as well. So just observe these things. Now, if you get obsessed about your accomplishments in the world, do your best to remind yourself to slow down and take breaks. Also remember that everything is okay in the now moment. It's often connected when we look into the future that we start to feel these obsessions or fears. But when we stay present with our body, with our breath, we tend to recognize that actually everything is okay and that we're fine, we're safe, we're doing great. So ask yourself, am I driven by fear or love and passion? If fear, worry, concern, or anything equivalent to that is present, could I just acknowledge that experience? And when we acknowledge something, we are actually allowing it to be there, but we're not giving it power. So fear is something that often we give fear way too much power. The mind often decides that fear is real, but very often fear is something that we're projecting out into the future. It's not actually real in the current now moment. So if fear, worry, concerns are present, could I just acknowledge that experience and then just allow myself to let it go? And I should also mention that Mercury is already in its pre-shadow phase at the time of the new moon. It entered this shadow phase on December 12th when it reached 8 degrees of Capricorn, and it will remain there until December 29th when it comes to a halt at 24 degrees of Capricorn. And for those who do not know what a pre-shadow phase is, a couple of weeks before Mercury starts its retrograde phase, we find ourselves traveling through territory that we will revisit once Mercury moves retrograde. And then again, revisit once Mercury goes direct. So it will go through the same territory 3 times. Once pre-shadow, second retrograde, third post-shadow phase. Now, we also covered the Mercury pre-shadow phase in much more detail in my webinar, Mercury pre-shadow phase and Chiron station direct. Feel free to dive into this further by clicking on the link below this video to get to my webinar page. And then also from December 22nd until January 1st, Mercury will be much more exalted because it starts its station before it goes retrograde. So pay attention to what comes up around long-term goals, business interactions, and your thoughts about authority, inner and outer, right? Authority, what's inside of you, and then how you relate to authority in the outside world. Now, in addition, you may need to revisit conversations, ideas, or interactions for greater inner clarity during the Mercury retrograde phase. So that will be from December 29th until January 18th. So pay attention to what comes up right now and then see if there's something maybe that needs to be readdressed during the Mercury retrograde phase. Now, let's talk about Saturn. Given that Saturn rules Capricorn, its placement in Aquarius plays a really vital role in the super new moon chart. And Saturn is associated with the law of karma. It is connected to the natural results of our actions. What we sow, we will reap. And in Aquarius, Saturn invites us to focus on and build communities that are sustainable and self-responsible. Now, we are sovereign beings who have choice. So ask yourself, where could I take 5% more responsibility for a choice that I made? And maybe in connection with certain communities or certain networks or certain affiliations that I'm a part of. And what might I do differently if I knew for sure that all of my choices had social and personal consequences? Remember, Saturn is all about consequences. You know, we take an action or we do something and it has a consequence. Now, might I slow down and take more time if I knew that my choices had social and personal consequences? And might I do the groundwork and be particularly discerning if that meant I could make better choices that created more beneficial outcomes for everyone? And these are some great Saturn in Aquarius questions to ask or journal on. Now, Saturn in Aquarius makes a semi-sextile to Mercury in Capricorn and Neptune in Pisces. And this makes Saturn the midpoint of a Mercury-Neptune sextile. So what does that mean? This means that we are invited to have a mature approach towards our long-term goals, to stop looking outside of ourselves for approval or validation, and to go inwards, to listen to our intuitive knowing, to really create a better relationship with our inner intuitive knowing. And once we acquire a deep sense of self-respect, self-control, and self-determination, which is not dependent on anything outside of ourselves, by the way. This is something we need to get to on our own. We can start to feel a deep sense of inner peace, wholeness, and joy. And so this is part of this aspect. Now, ask yourself, how can I acquire a deep sense of self-respect? And what would it take to become 5% more self-determined? And could I relinquish any sense of victimhood for the time being, just as an experiment. And just as an exploration, could I take 100% responsibility for who I am and how I show up in the world, including my responses to others? And this is an important part. Being 100% responsibility for who we are also means, when we are responding or reacting to life, to what happens outside of our own selves, out in the world, on TV, in politics, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our relationships, in our families, anything that takes place, how do I respond? How do I react when things are not, maybe when things are not in complete alignment with me, or when things are not the way I would like to see them? And we got to be responsible for that too, because our responses are important. They are a choice. Every response that we have is a choice. When we're reacting, we often don't have a choice because we're coming from an unconscious place. But when we're responding consciously, we do have choices. So could I take 100% responsibility for my responses? And once we have gained more self-respect, self-determination, and a sense of responsibility, we need to remember that those things cannot be taken away from us. Nobody, no one can take that away from us. And so therefore, this is really important stuff to practice and to move towards. And I'm not saying you have to be perfect at it from day one, but this is something, if we can really get better at these things, each one of us, then we have our inner authority. So ask yourself, once I can embrace my inner adult, what kind of future do I envision for myself and all beings on this planet? What realistic baby steps can I take to move towards this future? And where is it best to be flexible? And on the other hand, where must I remain focused and stay aligned with my visions or preferences? When we talk about visions for the future, it's important to remember that these visions are sort of like, you have to think of them as like lighthouses that give us a direction of where the land is, or where we're trying to get to. But it's not something that we actually want to run into. We just want it to be like a guide, like a direction, so that we're also not attached. We don't want to be attached to our visions. We want to see them as a guide. Now, the other thing that's really important with this supermoon chart is Chiron. Like I mentioned earlier already, Chiron, the wounded healer, ends its 5 months retrograde phase less than an hour before the supermoon becomes exact, therefore highly exalted, and will remain highly exalted until December 29th. And this exalted energy in Aries turns our attention towards our physical, sexual, and self-identity wounds. So you could also call it the wounded masculine. So Chiron represents our inner insecurities. It's basically those self-conscious and wounded places in us, and our inner wound of abandonment or feeling separate in some way, separate from the norm or separate from society. And it's also the need to make it on our own or to have a non-traditional approach. So Chiron is our personal healing process in this lifetime, and it can only be achieved through acceptance and compassion of the wound itself. And so we have to remember that this is also our greatest gift that we're getting through this wound of Chiron. Learning to be accepting and compassionate with ourselves and others, because that helps us be understanding and kind, which in turn helps us and others heal and connect on a human level. So this is really important. Chiron is a very, very important energy in our chart. Of course, we covered much more about Chiron and Aries and how it relates to our own birth charts in my last webinar, Chiron Station Direct. This is a close look at our healing journey and ability to use astrology for our own healing processes. So again, feel free to dive into this further by clicking on the link below this video that will take you straight to my webinar page on my website. Now, the highly exalted Chiron in Aries makes several aspects in the supermoon chart. It squares Venus in Capricorn. It still sextiles Mars in Gemini, which it has been for a while. And it quincunxes the South Node in Scorpio, which it also has been doing for a while. So let's unpack all of that. So Chiron square to Venus invites us to stretch past injury and insecurities in our relationships, but also in connection with our sense of self-worth and our finances or our own personal resources. Now, if we can bring compassion and a more holistic point of view to these issues, we will reach a new understanding of ourselves and our own healing journey. But it definitely requires us to stretch a little bit. So ask yourself, could I allow myself to be who I am, no matter what society deems acceptable or normal? Could I embrace my physical, sexual, or energetic masculine sensitivities and insecurities, even if this makes me seem abnormal or strange to other people? And what if social obligations could include, or at least be open to, a compassionate approach to ourselves and others? What might a non-judgmental and unique approach to myself and my social standing bring to my healing journey? So these are some beautiful questions in connection with that square. Now, Chiron's sextile to Mars is an opportunity to actively engage in our healing journey by learning more about it. So ask yourself, what might I learn about my healing journey when looking at my mother's or father's lineage in connection with wounding and painful experiences? Could I allow them to be human? Often it's sometimes hard to let our parents be human. So could I allow my parents to be human? And could I do the same for myself? And what if I took a curious approach towards my flaws, quirks, and insecurities? And how might this support my healing process or someone else's? Again, great questions for this Chiron sextile. Now, Chiron's quincunx to the South Node is part of a Yod-aspect that involves another quincunx between the South Node and Mars. So we have South Node, quincunx Mars, South Node, quincunx Chiron, Chiron sextiles Mars. So they're completely interconnected in this Yod-aspect. Now that makes the South Node in Scorpio the focal point or apex point of this Yod, asking us to pay special attention to our traumas or self-protective behaviors in connection with past experiences. So ask yourself, where am I reacting versus responding to my circumstances? And this often reactions, again, they're unconscious because they're connected to something that has already happened. Now, how might impatience contribute to my reacting rather than responding? And could I be 5% more aware of any behaviors stemming from experiences that were either painful or made me feel out of control? Remember, with Scorpio, often there's this sense of like, it could make us feel out of control. There's like a power struggle of some sort, possibly. Now, could I release anything that keeps me stuck because of fearful, addictive, or controlling behaviors? And we have to really dig deep with this apex point, with this focal point, because it's not always easy to admit to ourselves that we are scared. It's not always easy to admit that we have addictions. It's not always easy to admit that we are trying to control things or other people. So could I release anything that keeps me stuck because of fearful, addictive, or controlling behaviors? And be kind to yourself here. as you're investigating this. And what about sexual or emotional obsessions? Defensive behaviors? Could I trust life and open my heart 5% more and release all of it? So the reason why we have these behaviors in place very often, any of them, whether it's fear or control or addictions or obsessions or defensive behaviors, very often they are in place because we are trying to protect ourselves. We are trying to prevent something from happening again that has been painful in our lives or that has traumatized us. But however, that is exactly what then keeps that in place, because we stay frozen with those things, with those emotions. And so trust is very important. Trust in life and opening our heart. So could I trust life and open my heart 5% more and release all of these protective mechanisms in my life? Now, last but not least, Venus in Capricorn trines Uranus in Taurus. And Uranus always brings a certain level of creativity and reinvention to the table. So you can ask yourself here is, how might new, fresh, and practical ideas create progress with my long-term goals connected to finances or relationships? And what is asking to be reinvented? Where do I need to bring sort of this like reinvention energy to the table? Now, to sum it all up for this super new moon, it asks us to redefine our relationship to truth, to responsibility, to accountability, and power. We're also invited to look at our attitudes and perspectives and make realistic choices. This super new moon also conveys an extra potent message about our perception of physical reality and our relationship to power or feeling empowered. So what you can ask yourself is, what might I notice if I became 5% more aware of my personal power? Where might I have given it away to others? And how might I begin to reclaim it? Right? If you can make yourself responsible for everything that occurs in your life, then you hold the power always. When you blame other people or when you make other people responsible for where you're at, then you're giving your power away. Now, this super new moon also calls us to stand for love, truth, and healing. And it reminds us that each one of us is wounded and can heal through the power of compassion and acceptance. So ask yourself, might a holistic approach, seeing myself as a spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical being, support my personal growth at this time? And then as best as you can, keep breathing, feeling, and witnessing. And remember, we are all participating in an unprecedented evolutionary shift. We are all divine beings living in a dense physical reality, and Capricorn is that density. We're attempting to remember who we are and what we came here to do. Now, I have a really beautiful quote here by Viktor Frankl, and I just want to share that real briefly because I thought it was Viktor Frankl. By the way, he's a psychiatrist who was imprisoned in the Nazi concentration camps, and he is an author of the book Man's Search for Meaning. And he says, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And I think that resonates very beautifully with Jupiter in Aries and Jupiter squaring the new moon. So I wanted to share that. And then, choose wisely for 2023 and beyond, because this new moon becomes exact at the end of December. So the whole cycle of this new moon phase will move into 2023. Now, if you have an ascendant or any personal planets in 0 to 4 degrees of Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, or Libra, or 29 degrees of Sagittarius, Gemini, Virgo, or Pisces, then this new moon will impact you more than others. But even if you don't have an ascendant or personal planets in those signs and degrees, the house placement of the new moon will indicate which area of life is most ready for a new beginning for the next 28 days. So just take a look at in your natal chart, in your birth chart, where does 1.5 degrees of Capricorn land in your birth chart? And that will signify a new beginning for the next 28 days. Now, if you can, obviously for the next 28 days after the new moon becomes exact, after December 23rd. So you can also check out my 30-minute class, How to Read Your Birth Chart. You can get free access to that via my homepage at astrologercoach.com. And if you scroll down to where it says free class, there's like a little window that says free class. Click on that and you can watch that video so you can see more clearly how to make use of that, how to look that up in your birth chart. Now, let's talk about new moon intentions. The new moon is also the best time to set some powerful intentions for this month's moon cycle. The perfect time is always after the new moon becomes exact and not during a moon void, of course. So this month, there are two best and most potent times to set intentions. The first one will be anytime between 5:17 a.m. on December 23rd and 10:11 p.m. on December 24th. And then the second period will be between 2:14 a.m. and 5:17 a.m. on December 25th. So nice and early. This is all New York time, East Coast time in the US. If you live in a time zone other than US East Coast time and you don't want to be converting time zones, then I suggest that you join me on my Facebook fan page or follow me on Twitter. I post reminders when it's time to set your intentions, several reminders. So when you see those reminders pop up, you just sit down and set your intentions. And if you need more information about setting new moon intentions, go to my website, to the blog page, and then look for astrology articles or the tag new moon intentions. I will also have a link below this video, so you can just click on that as well. All right. Now, if you have any general questions for me, please email me at info@astrologercoach.com. Any personal questions that require of me to pull up your birth chart, please book a reading at astrologercoach.com, or any questions that you might have about what's coming up in 2023, because we'll be covering that. Join the next monthly forecasting forum on January 6th. We will focus on the coming year, planetary shifts and alignments in 2023. And the early bird special is available until January 4th at midnight, East Coast time. And yeah, that's it. So hopefully I'll be seeing a lot of you. My members will hear from me in 2 weeks around the time of the full moon, so we can take a look at how far we have come since setting our new moon intentions. And everyone else in 4 weeks for the next new moon. Have a wonderful holiday season. And as always, stay focused on your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Okay, much love. I am astrologer coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.